This is FAFO, holler it loud. Fuck around with fiction, get the facts drawn. Getting triggers just the cost of the crowd. We're toxic to the lies, truth we're proud. This is FAFO, no smooth talk, no vow. You brought your stories, we brought the real. Now run your mouth and meet the South. Now fuck around and
1947. A lonely ranch outside Roswell, New Mexico. Debris scattered across the street, across the desert, military trucks, federal silence, and one newspaper headline that would change human history forever. RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. But within hours, the story changed. Suddenly, it wasn't flying saucer. It wasn't extraterrestrial. It wasn't a weather balloon. Nothing to see here. Move along, children. And for nearly 80 years, humanity has been trapped between belief, ridicule, fear, and secrecy. But now, something has changed. Because under a new mandate pushed by President Donald Trump, government agencies have begun releasing additional UFO and UAP-related files to the public. And suddenly, the conversation no longer feels like science fiction. What if humanity's greatest mystery was never whether UFOs were real, but how long have governments known something? And that's today's episode, folks. We are talking about the UFO Conundrum right here on the FAFO Podcast. It's taking over everything. You turn on the news, there it is. New documentaries are being churned out left and right on the subject. New files are in the works of being released. There's supposed to be 40 new videos released in the next 30 days. Videos. These are supposed to be above and beyond the grainy camera footage we saw. I'm sure there was going to be some in there. But what all might we see? And what all is being fought against in the internal workings of the government, the deep state part, the so-called deep state part? And what might we find out yet? We're going to talk about all of that today. All of that today on the FAFO Podcast. I almost said UFO Podcast. It's going to sound like that by the time this one is over with. But the discussion is real. And if you want to be a part of the discussion, you can join us live every day, Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. on Kick and on Facebook. Real easy to do. Then all you have to do is get in the comment section. Let us know your thoughts and opinions on everything we talk about. Become part of the conversation because the FAFO Podcast is your podcast. Now, if you're just listening to the podcast, I mean, you should probably listen on Spotify. You can also catch us on Amazon Music and Apple Podcast. All of those places. So you don't just have to watch it on YouTube. You don't just have to watch it on Facebook. And you don't have to watch it just on Rumble or Kick. Lots of ways you can tune in to the FAFO Podcast. Lots of ways you can help. The descriptions are in the links down below. Check them out. Visit our merch store. We got some cool stuff coming. And it's going to be a great ride. It's already been a lot of fun the last couple of weeks developing this. We're in week 3 now. And looking forward to more. If you've got specific topics you would like for us to cover, let us know. It's that easy. If you got specific shows you want us to do, let us know. I've got a big one coming. I have been working on. Scripting these things out isn't the easiest thing in the world, but I do enjoy it. It's amazing what you learn in the process. So good morning, Mike, and to everybody else who's watching out there. We're going to get into this because we got a lot to talk about. There are, as I said, plenty of documentaries to watch. Lots of things to happen if that's what you're into. I watched the Bob Lazar, the S4 Bob Lazar Doc the other day, it was great. It was incredible. It was incredible. Even my girlfriend was like, whoa, that guy's believable. And he is. Good morning, Jennifer. How are you doing? And that's the cool thing about it is you just, now more than ever, this has gone from being something only nerds in their mom's basement talked about to what everybody's talking about. And it's wild. And as Mike says here, the technology after the late 1940s is light years beyond the 250,000 years of human history where we barely got out of the let's create fire, right? 250,000 years from creating fire to firearms. And then the last 80 years, the technological leap has been staggering. Staggering. So we're going to talk about several things. We no longer call them UFOs. They're called UAPs now. And does changing the name make the phenomenon sound more credible? We'll talk about it. And why are governments openly discussing these UAP now after decades of ridicule? And maybe the biggest question of all, it probably isn't, are we alone in the universe? It's how long have they been here? So we're diving deep. I hope you're ready for it. I was putting this episode together and I was like, I understand what this is going to sound like today. I do. I understand what we're going to get into. And I know what it's going to sound like. I know how it's going to come across. But if you know me at all, I don't give a damn. We're still going to talk about it. And we're still going to do it because it's fun. It's exciting. And it's different than the normal humdrum stuff of our everyday lives. So let's go. Because Roswell became the blueprint for every conspiracy theory that followed. Because once official stories start changing, truth starts collapsing. And when people stop trusting explanations, they start imagining what's being hidden. And the fastest way to create conspiracy theories is inconsistent official stories, and that started on a massive scale in 1947. Think about the world around you for a moment. Your everyday life. You wake up, go to work, come home, sit in your favorite chair, scroll your phone, watch television, follow routines so familiar, you barely think about them anymore. Then you go to sleep and repeat it all again tomorrow, day after day, normalcy. It's predictable, explainable. This is how billions of people live their lives, grounded in the belief that the world ultimately makes sense. That governments understand reality. That science has mapped out most of existence. That humanity sits comfortably at the center of known life. But do me a favor. Open your mind for just a second to a terrifying possibility. What if the world you believed was simple was never simple at all? What if beneath all the routines, politics, religions, wars, economies, and distractions, there existed a deeper reality hidden from public view for decades? A reality involving unexplained intelligence, mysterious aerial phenomena, and truth so destabilizing that governments feared humanity itself might not be psychologically prepared to face them. Because the real UFO conundrum may not be whether something is out there, but whether the modern world was quietly built on secrets humanity has no explanation for. Think about that, because for decades, UFO discussions were mocked. I mean, come on. if you discuss this, you were what, ridiculed? You were called paranoid, or you were just a conspiracy addict, right? That's what you were called if you discussed these things. You would discuss them, people like, oh no, they roll their eyes. Oh, not this weirdo again. I mean, Hollywood turned UFOs into entertainment, but governments just quietly kept investigating them anyway. Think about all these files and releases. Think about Project Blue Book, Majestic. Now, for some of you who's just a modern everyday citizen who doesn't read any of this material, those are brand new terms for you. But for those of us who have looked into this over the years and been fascinated by it, we know those terms. And it's strange how something can be called fake publicly while being investigated privately for decades and having these names applied to them. And now the government itself uses the term UAP versus UFO. Why is that? Because UFO sounds like what? Flying saucers, little green men, science fiction. But UAP sounds more what? Military, scientific, official. It's a lot harder to dismiss because it's unidentified aerial phenomenon. We've taken the science fiction and goofiness out of it and just said, hey, look, we don't know what that is that's up in the air. We can call that a UAP and get away with it. When UFO meant the same thing until it took on a whole different meaning. Because UFO was green men. It was aliens. But UAP, we can get behind UAP. UAP, we can say. Changing UFO to UAP may have been the greatest rebranding in modern history. And that's just the truth of it. You know, when Donald Trump was elected, one of the central themes of his campaign was transparency. The idea that the American people have been kept in the dark for too long by powerful institutions, intelligence agencies, and political insiders. His supporters expected long-hidden information to finally come into the light. I mean, among the most demanded disclosures were what? The Epstein files, the JFK assassination files, right? All those records. But perhaps, most mysteriously of all, the UFO files. People have been wanting to know. Sitting officials in the government want to know. Senators, representatives all want to know. And during Trump's first term, the UFO conversation quietly began shifting from fringe conspiracy territory into legitimate public dialogue. I think it was around the late 2010s, especially after the military encounters and the Navy pilot testimonies that came to light. They all became public, and the government became increasingly stopped. They increasingly stopped using the culturally loaded term UFO, and they replaced it with the UAP. Suddenly, after that happens, the mystery sounded less like science fiction and more like a national security issue, something they could control. Then came the moment that reignited the fire completely. In a rare move for sitting president, Trump ordered broad releases of classified UAP-related files and records, pushing the conversation into mainstream public discourse unlike ever before. Think about that. Trump did that. Yeah. Trump did that. And how wild is that? That's what we're getting now. And these things that are released, all these files, and there have been tons. And by the way, you can go to the website, and it has already been visited 1 billion times. And that's when many people began asking a chilling question, right? If there's truly nothing there, why has the government spent nearly 80 years controlling the narrative so carefully? It's a great question. Why? If there's truly nothing there to see, if there's nothing to see here, don't look over here, then why? Why have they done it? Think about this. The government has agreed to release UAP reports, pilot encounters, military footage, radar data, historical records to the public. Think about how insane that would have been in the 1990s. It wouldn't have happened. It didn't happen. The federal government, the Pentagon, intelligence agencies, openly discussing unexplained objects in our skies would not have happened in the 1990s. And yet somehow, most people are too distracted by social media to realize disclosure may have already been happening. Humanity may be watching disclosure unfold in slow motion. And this is where the conversation gets truly uncomfortable. Because once President Trump pushed for the release of deeper UFO and UAP-related files, many people began noticing something strange. Resistance, delays, redactions, bureaucratic walls, intelligence agencies moving slowly, carefully, sometimes reluctantly. This is where the term deep state began exploding back into the public conversation. We've heard about the deep state for years, and then it kind of dwindles down, and you forget about it. And now all of a sudden, bam, here we are. Deep state, the idea that within massive government institutions exists a permanent network of unelected intelligence officials, military contractors, bureaucrats, and career operatives who continue functioning regardless of who sits in the Oval Office. Think about that. Think about that. To critics, the question became chillingly simple. If the President of the United States orders disclosure and agencies still resist, now I want you to think about this. If they still resist, if they stall, if they classify or withhold information, then who truly controls the flow of knowledge? I mean, do these agencies ultimately answer to elected leadership at all then? Or to a much older system of power, operating behind layers of secrecy, national security, compartmentalization, and institutional self-preservation? Whether someone believes in a literal deep state or simply the reality of entrenched bureaucratic power, one thing is undeniable. The deeper the UFO conversation goes, the more resistance seems to emerge from within the very institution tasked with guarding the secrets. Again, we're talking about institutional secrecy, intelligence compartmentalization, bureaucratic resistance. We're talking about classified programs, not proven fact claims. And the one reason UFO culture exploded again, and I can't say this enough. And when I say this, listen to what I'm trying to tell you here. The one reason UFO culture exploded again is because many people believe the real files still aren't public. They believe the real files are still being controlled. Because when we get files, we get blurry videos, pictures, obvious pictures that are not anything related to what we want to know about. Sure, it's a UFO. It's unidentified. It's a UAP. But a UAP of what? Of a pie pan upside down? Obviously fake photos. Some that you can't tell, some that are so blurry. And I'm not one of these people when it comes to the blurry images who says, how? Have you ever, look, action shots are hard. If your cameras aren't set for action shots, you're going to get a blurry image. I've been taking pictures for a long time, and photographers will tell you this. You better have the right equipment when you're shooting this stuff, or you're going to get a blurry, grainy image because the object is moving and your lens and your aperture speed is not capable of hanging up with it. And that's a lot of the reasons you see a lot of blurry photos. When a UFO pops up, you don't have time to go, okay, let me change my f-stop speed. I got to do all this. Lighting correct. Where are we at? You don't have time to do that. You go, snap, everything's moving. There's a reason they're blurry. But no one talks about it. But that is the reason. A lot of times your blurry images are human user error. But we want serious material. We don't want any of that. All right, that's what's going to have. It's going to take to convince people. Not all these blurry videos that I still think hold a lot of truth to them, because there's no explanation for a lot of them, even still. Now, according to whistleblower claims, some whistleblower claims, former officials, investigators, and politicians, there may still be that internal resistance to full disclosure. Like, they know it, they see it. You have a few of these representatives that are fighting for this, and they're still getting stonewalled every time they turn around. Because the more secrecy exists, the more people assume the hidden truth must be enormous. So they're not helping. If there's nothing truly out there, the more they hold this information close to the vest, the more it looks like they're lying when there's nothing out there. And people won't believe it. So if what you're trying to do is protect people, you're not. You're not. I mean, at this point, the UFO conversation has moved far beyond blurry photographs and shaky, grainy footage captured on old camcorders and cell phones. What has changed the discussion entirely is the growing collection of military videos, cockpit recordings, radar tracking data, and firsthand testimony coming directly from trained pilots themselves. These are not random internet personalities chasing clicks. These are men and women with years, sometimes decades, of aerial combat, surveillance, aviation expertise. People trained to identify aircraft, atmospheric anomalies, enemy technology, and flight behavior under high-pressure conditions. Yet, many of these pilots describe witnessing objects, performing maneuvers that seem to defy known aerodynamic capabilities, like sudden acceleration. That's one. Impossible direction changes, hovering without visible propulsion, and quite frankly, movements that conventional aircraft simply should not be capable of. And perhaps the most unsettling part isn't just what they saw. It's how seriously the military itself now appears to be taking their testimony. Because once trained professionals, advanced radar systems, infrared targeting cameras, and military command structures all begin collaborating and corroborating the same unexplained phenomena, the mystery stops sounding like science fiction. It starts becoming something much harder to dismiss. Mike says, President Carter brought up he saw a UFO. He was mocked relentlessly. And that's true. Mike has his own personal thing here. He said, I saw a blinking light deep in the night sky. I thought it was a satellite. It was crossing from west to east slowly, suddenly zoomed northward with incredible speed the next day. Of all people, Eva Mikalovna posted she saw the same thing I saw. And Eva's a singer, beautiful singer, by the way, incredible. And there you have two right there. And that's the thing. And by the way, if you want to become part of the discussion, if you're just joining us here, you can do that by going to becoming a member on Kick, following the FAFO Podcast on Kick, or going to the Facebook page. And you can jump in the comment section and tell us what you think. What you saw. Become part of the conversation. Become part of the conversation. It's easy to do. Because we are in it this morning, folks. We are just in it this morning. I mean, and that's kind of what's funny when we're talking about some of this stuff. There have been several encounters. We talked about that. One of the most unsettling, if you're looking at this from a realistic point of view and you want clarity and you want something that makes you go, damn, that's hard to ignore. Maybe one of the most unsettling UFO stories aren't from conspiracy theorists. Again, they're from military personnel. Because these men and women with these backgrounds, they know what they see. They know what's up there. They know what they're used to seeing. Our men and women fly some of the most technologically advanced aircraft ever created. They have seen it all. They've seen all this aerial phenomenon, ball lightning, all these different kind of atmospheric anomalies that you can see. Let's take the USS Nimitz incident. This happened back in 2004. And it's probably the most famous military UAP encounter now because they've released the radar footage of this thing. Because you had fighter pilots from the U.S. Navy, and that was on the USS Nimitz, which is a carrier strike group, right? Just off the coast of California in 2004. So you had David Fravor, who reported encountering a strange white object shaped like Tic Tac candy. I know most of you who follow this stuff have heard of these Tic Tac shaped UAPs. Now, the object reportedly hovered above the ocean, moved erratically, accelerated instantly, had no visible wings, no exhaust, no propulsion system. Radar operators reportedly tracked this object, descending from extremely high altitude to sea level in seconds. Fravor himself later reported and stated the object seemed to intelligently react to the aircraft movements. Again, he said, and he quotes, the object seemed to intelligently react to their aircraft movements. Now, here's what's even wilder. The military later confirmed the video footage associated with the event was authentic Navy footage. They weren't hiding it. They weren't trying to hide it. They said, F it. Here you go. Make of it what you will. What about the Go Fast video? Have y'all heard of this one? The Go Fast video? Now, this one was released publicly years later. It's military infrared footage that showed an object appearing to move rapidly over the ocean. I know y'all seen this one. The pilots, you could hear them acting surprised, like, what is that? It was funny because you could hear them on this footage talking about it. The footage came from the military targeting systems. They have all these trained personnel that monitor all this stuff, and their official aircraft sensors. This is not random civilians doing this. And then you have the gimbal incident, another one. The object appeared to rotate during mid-flight. It moved against strong winds and behaved unusually compared to known aircraft. The pilots in that footage of the gimbal incident can be heard saying there's a whole fleet of them, which immediately intensified public fascination with that. That's wild. It's wild. Back in 2019, this is not that long ago, the USS Omaha had an incident Military personnel reportedly tracked spherical objects near Navy ships. And some of these objects appear to descend into the ocean without visible damage or obvious propulsion. Think about that. Think about that. How wild is that? And then you've got the Phoenix Lights. This is in 1997. This is one of the most famous mass sightings ever. Thousands of civilians and reportedly some military witnesses observed massive lights over Phoenix. And the event remains heavily debated. It is. And it's, but I think that one, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the one that Kurt Russell saw happen. I know it was around that time period because he's a pilot and he was in the sky flying at that time. He reported this and he called it in. And when he got home, he was watching the news. Goldie was in there and she was watching it, and they were calling his number. He realized, oh shit, that was me. I called that in. Fascinating. And then you had in 1980, you had the Rendlesham Forest incident. Now this is called, and sometimes known as like Britain's Roswell. It occurred near Rendlesham Forest, near the U.S. military base in England. The military personnel there, they reported strange lights, landing craft, radiation readings, unusual symbols. I mean, there you go. And there's several more. You have the Washington, D.C. UFO incident of 1952. And you can look all these up. And the reason I'm telling you their names so you can look them up. If you want to delve deeper into each of these incidents, we just don't have enough time here to do it. I mean, we could literally take any section of what I mapped out for you guys today and do a whole show just on one section of this thing. And I encourage you, if you're all interested, dive into it. I've been to the government site, looking at these files, and it is massive just what they've released so far. And I think I mentioned this a few shows earlier, but it's really fascinating. If you get in there and start looking at them, woo, it's a lot. There's a lot. But like there were multiple UFOs reported over Washington in 1952. Radar, military system, air traffic control, all tracked these things. And it became one of the earliest major government UFO scares, which I believe outside of Roswell, really, they said, hey, look, we've got to at least keep track of what's going on until we can justifiably and verifiably say, oh, no, this is what it was. There was a Belgian UFO wave from 89 to 1990 where the military radar and witnesses in Belgium tracked triangular objects over populated areas. The Belgian Air Force even publicly investigated the incidents. So why are these cases different? What separates these sightings from random internet videos? And because here's the reason. Many people involved and many situations involved what? Radar, infrared, pilots, visual signs, military systems, command level reporting. Not the nerd in mom's basement. All right? Not the conspiracy theorist who just loves reading and watching about UFOs. These are professionals who the last thing on their mind was to go out hunting UFOs. These aren't just stories from people in the woods. These are fighter pilots. I mean, radar operators, military tracking systems, and government investigations. People who've seen everything are involved in this. And I do think that the most unsettling UFO incidents, the most unsettling stories are the ones that involved trained observers, especially observers with military equipment. Think about it. And there are plenty of those out there. Now, do any of these prove aliens, extraterrestrials, or interdimensional beings. No, they don't. But what do they prove? What do they prove? They prove that governments and militaries have encountered aerial phenomena they publicly admit they cannot fully explain. And that alone has radically changed the conversation. That one thing right there has changed everything. Oh. But now we arrive at the question that may terrify governments, religions, scientists, and ordinary people more than the UFOs themselves. Can humanity psychologically handle the truth if disclosure ever becomes undeniable? Because this isn't just about strange lights in the sky anymore. This is about the possible collapse of humanity's perceived place in existence. Look, think about this, and we've talked about this. Most people wake up every day believing reality is stable, it's explainable, and ultimately understandable. We trust that governments have answers. We trust science has mapped most of reality. We trust humanity sits near the center of known intelligent life. But what happens if all of that fractures overnight? What happens if world governments confirm that non-human intelligence exists and may have existed far longer than anyone publicly admitted? Financial markets could panic. Religions across the globe would face massive existential questions. Political systems could destabilize. Human identity itself could fundamentally change. And maybe that's the real reason secrecy has existed for so long. Not because the public couldn't physically survive the truth, but because civilization itself might not emotionally survive the shock of discovering humanity was never alone at all. So, is the question really not that are aliens real, but what happens if humanity knows? Imagine tomorrow morning, every government on Earth confirms non-human intelligence exists. What happens next? What happens to religions? What happens to stock markets across the globe? What happens to politics, science? What happens to very human identity itself? Our ego, our belief that humanity is the center of the universe. Humanity may spend more time asking if aliens exist than asking what happens if they actually do. And this is where the conversation moves beyond government secrecy into something even more profound: religion. That makes people uncomfortable. Why? Why? Because for thousands of years, human civilization has built its understanding of existence around spiritual identity, around creation stories, sacred text, and the belief that humanity occupies a unique place in the universe. Entire cultures, moral systems, and civilizations have been shaped by those beliefs. So what happens? What happens if undeniable evidence emerges that intelligent non-human life exists? Would faith collapse under the weight of cosmic revelation? Or would religions evolve and adapt the way they always have throughout history? It's a fair question. It's a serious question. Because some believers argue extraterrestrial life would simply represent another part of creation. Proof that God's universe is larger and more complex than humanity imagined. And yet others fear the psychological shock could shake the foundation of organized religion itself, forcing billions of people to confront questions they were never prepared to ask. Because disclosure wouldn't just challenge science or government narratives. It could fundamentally challenge humanity's understanding of creation, of purpose, divinity, and our place in existence itself. And if that day ever comes, the greatest global conflict may not be political or military. It may be spiritual. You see, for thousands of years, and this is something I've thought of for a long time, I've had debates with this. For thousands of years, humanity has built civilizations around what? Religion, spiritual identity, creation narratives, and humanity's place in existence. We think these terrorist groups that we face are religion-based. All right, there's this spiritual dogma they have. It's not based off common sense day to day. It's not any of that. It's based off of their faith and their religious beliefs. America, one nation under God. That was our founding fathers. And that has been humanity for 250,000 years. So again, what happens if another intelligent species exists? Does religion collapse? Or does it evolve? The debates I used to get into evolved around one thing. I've always believed, as a Christian, and to me, as someone who has common sense, I've always believed that God is the ultimate scientist. So when we're just speaking just from a biblical, not a science perspective, just from a biblical perspective, if God could create the entire world and the firmament, why would he just stop at one little planet? In the vastness of everything, why would God do that? That's not a limit God put on himself. That's a limit humanity has put on God. That is human arrogance at its highest, human ego. Humanity's belief we are the special one. That's humanity. The discovery of extraterrestrial life wouldn't just change science. It literally, and I said it, and in my notes I said here, I wrote it could define humanity itself, and that's not true. It will redefine humanity itself. I don't think there's any getting around it. And having said all of that, all we've covered so far, perhaps the most unsettling possibility of all isn't that extraterrestrials suddenly arrive tomorrow in massive ships hovering over our cities. Maybe the truly terrifying idea is far quieter than that. What if they've always been here? What if throughout human history, hidden beneath ancient myths, religious encounters, unexplained sightings, sky gods, mysterious visitors, and recurring stories passed down across civilizations, humanity has been witnessing the same phenomenon over and over again without fully understanding it. Every culture on earth contains legends of beings descending from the heavens, imparting knowledge, appearing suddenly, vanishing without explanation. Ancient cave art, religious texts, unexplained structures, impossible astronomical knowledge. All of it suddenly begins looking different once you open your mind to the possibility that humanity may not have been alone for as long as we think. Imagine that. Imagine opening your mind to that possibility that humanity may not have been alone for as long as we think. What would that look like to you? And maybe that's the ultimate UFO conundrum. Not whether something is coming, but whether something has been quietly observing, influencing, or existing alongside humanity since the very beginning. Because if that possibility were ever proven true, it wouldn't just rewrite history books. It would completely redefine what it means to be human. And that leads us to the biggest FAFO of all. Because the conversation itself hasn't changed. The conversation itself has changed. And I heard that the other night. So I said, well, the conversation hasn't really changed, but it has. It absolutely has. Because for decades, humanity laughed at UFO discussions. Laughed at it. And now, governments investigate them. Militaries track them. Congress discusses them. Files are being released publicly. And suddenly, the mystery no longer feels impossible. You turn on your TV, you've got a senator, somebody from Congress up there talking about the UFO files and where they're at, what they're hoping to get out of this, what they're wanting for the public. 10 years ago, people on the lowdown. 20 years ago, you wouldn't even heard about it. We talked about Carter. Reagan even talked about a UFO sighting. And then everything's hushed. It was laughed at and pushed away to the side. I think the greatest FAFO moment in human history may be discovering the universe was never empty to begin with. So as I do with every show, I have a few questions I'd like to leave you with, and you can answer. Question 1, and I am curious to know. So you're always welcome to answer these. I go back on these videos, and I look at the comments. I love reading the comments. Could society psychologically handle confirmed extraterrestrial disclosure? That's your first question. Could society psychologically handle extraterrestrial disclosure? And that leads to the question number 2. Would alien disclosure destroy religion or transform it? And question number 3, do you believe governments are still hiding more serious UFO, UAP information? I even throw you a bonus question. I'll throw you a bonus question that you can just ponder. If aliens are real, right? If aliens are real, do you think they arrived recently or have they always been here? You see, the greatest mystery may no longer be whether something is out there, but it's whether humanity is finally ready to admit it. Is your government finally ready to admit it? And if our government admits it, how many other governments are just going to come right out and say, whoo, thank God America just admitted it. We can too. Here's our stuff. Take a look. What you guys think? Mike says, I love this topic. The movies of the 50s shoot aliens first no matter what. Root for Rocky. We were talking about that movie yesterday, which is a great movie, by the way, with Ryan Gosling. What a great movie that was. But guys, I appreciate you being here for today's episode. If you like what you saw here, what you heard here, then send us more ideas. I mean, I'm all for it. I'm all for talking about anything. Mike here says, my major in college was archaeology and anthropology. Every major human leap in knowledge was separated by 5,000 years. Stone tools, the wheel, planting crops, trade, sea travel. I believe aliens have been visiting for thousands of years. Very good points. That leap, right? He talks about that major leap right there. I mean, I know there are people say, that's just how it works. That just happens. All of a sudden there's a spark in someone's brain and woof, here we go. Maybe. I don't believe so. I believe there have been influences guiding us along from the beginning. And you can make of that what you will. But I'm in the same boat as Mike here. I believe the same thing. If you want to become part of the conversation, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Kick. Be sure to become part of our YouTube channel or our Rumble channel, whichever suits you best. Also, if you just like the audio versions of this show, you can catch it on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Amazon Music. Guys, I appreciate y'all tuning in today. Been another great show. We'll be back here tomorrow, 9 a.m., with another episode of the FAFO Podcast. And who knows what we're going to talk about tomorrow. I never know until the evening when it hits me. And then I have to jump into research mode. Today's show was that thing. You never know what's going to spark an idea and a conversation. The key is don't be afraid to have the conversation. This is the Fuck Around and Find Out podcast. Facts, truth, no BS. Let's effing go.
A tank of gas. Does he boots on the wood, let the whiskey pass? I ain't preaching from a pulpit, I'm talking from the scar. You can dress up a lie, but it won't get far. They call it toxic when it burns your tongue. I call it true when it's finally sung. Got a dog-eared Bible of the things they hide, and a match for the curtains, let the daylight inside. You want comfort, son, you missed your turn, this road.